She threw my clothes onto the wet lawn and shouted that I was worthless. That was the moment I understood something in me had finally stopped bending. I didn't answer Clara. I simply stood there on the porch, my thin cardigan slipping off one shoulder, watching the wind lift the sleeve of my old blouse as it lay on the grass. She looked so young in her anger, so sure of her right to speak to me like that. Her hair was perfect, her nails perfect, her voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet Sunday morning. I suppose she thought humiliation would work on me the way it once did. At 79, shame is a luxury I no longer pay for. Andrew wasn't there. He rarely was when things reached this point. He'd gone golfing with colleagues, pretending not to notice the strain living between his wife and his mother required. He always hoped we would sort things out, as he liked to say. But he never looked closely enough to see that Clara wasn't sorting anything. She was erasing, shrinking my presence in my own home, inch by inch, until I took up no more space than a coat on a hook. I stepped down the porch stairs slowly. My joints protested, but I kept my movements steady. I bent down and picked up the cardigan first, then the blouse, then the folded slacks that she must have carried out in a hurry because she'd dropped one leg in a puddle. I brushed them off as best I could. There was no anger in my hands, only a tired sort of calm that comes when a truth has sat inside you for too long. Clara stood with her arms crossed, blocking the doorway. "You need to leave, Helen. I can't babysit you anymore. You make everything heavier." It was the way she said heavier that landed. As if I were a burden she was dragging behind her. As if nearly 8 decades of life could be reduced to an inconvenience she felt entitled to discard. Perhaps she believed that the house was theirs, that my presence was optional. Andrew once joked that I lived there as long as I wanted, the way a guest might. I suppose they both forgot whose name was on the deed. I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her the documents were in the bottom of my leather bag, worn soft with age. She'd never paid attention to the details of real life anyway. She saw my things as old, outdated, meaningless. She saw me the same way. I walked past her without a word. She didn't expect that. She stepped aside, startled, as if I had broken some unspoken rule that elders must defend themselves, argue, cry. But there was nothing left to argue about. The street was quiet. A neighbor's dog barked once, then fell silent. I carried my bag by the handle, careful not to let the strap dig into my shoulder. Inside it, folded between a wool scarf and an old photograph of my late husband, was the deed. The original one. The one Andrew never bothered to ask about, and Clara never imagined existed. My gray skirt brushed the tops of my shoes as I walked down the driveway. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I had spent more years there than either of them. Every chipped tile and uneven floorboard lived in my memory already. Leaving wasn't erasing anything. It was simply stepping out of a room where no one listened anymore. At the corner of the street, I paused for a moment to adjust the strap of my bag. The air smelled faintly of pine from the trees old Mr. Henderson planted decades ago. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I was not running away. I was walking toward the first decision I had made for myself in a very long time. Martha opened the door before I could knock twice. She always did that, even when we were girls. "Helen, dear, what happened?" she asked, pulling me in by the arm the way someone pulls in a person they're afraid might drift away. I didn't answer right away. My bag felt heavier than it was, and for a moment I stood in her entryway like a traveler who'd misplaced her destination. Martha, being Martha, didn't ask again. She guided me to the kitchen table and put on the kettle, as if boiling water could steady the world. I sat down, folded my hands, and took in her small house with its mismatched chairs and crocheted blankets. It smelled of lavender oil and yesterday's soup. Comfort smells. Honest smells. She finally sat across from me. "Tell me." I looked at her, at the familiar creases around her mouth, at the steady eyes that had known me since I was 14. "Clara threw my clothes on the lawn," I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. "Told me to get out." Martha's face didn't shift into shock. She simply exhaled. "Then it's been brewing longer than you admitted." I nodded. "She's been circling the idea for years, I suppose." "She just finally found the nerve." "She didn't find nerve," Martha corrected gently. "She found comfort. Andrew lets her do as she pleases." I wanted to defend him the way mothers do, but the words wouldn't come. Andrew had become a man who avoided trouble like it was contagious. He thought neutrality made him fair. It didn't. It made him absent. Martha placed a teacup in front of me. Even before I took the first sip, the warmth moved through my fingers. "So what now?" she asked. "I left," I said simply. "I took my things and walked." I didn't argue. "Good," she murmured. "It's about time you stopped explaining yourself." I looked down at my hands. They've aged quietly over the years, the skin thinning, the veins rising like blue threads. For a long time I used them for everyone else. Cooking, mending, smoothing over conflicts, lifting burdens, signing checks, calming fears. But rarely for myself. "I feel tired," I admitted. Not sad. Just tired all the way through. Martha leaned back in her chair. "You've been carrying disrespect for so long it tricked you into thinking it was normal. But it wears a person down. You held that home together for decades, and somehow you ended up treated like a lodger." She paused. "Helen, you know you can stay here as long as you need." I nodded. "Thank you." We sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence shared by people who don't need to fill every space between sentences. Outside the window, the late afternoon light softened the edges of the trees. I hadn't realized how tense my shoulders were until being here loosened them. Martha reached for my bag. "You brought everything that matters?" "I believe so." She opened it without asking, just like she used to when we were young and swapping aprons. She saw the folded clothes, the wool scarf, the tin with my sewing needles. Then her hand brushed the envelope containing the deed. "Helen," she said softly, "you brought this." I did. "Is that why you're so calm?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe because for the first time in years, I remembered the house is mine. Legally. Fully. They acted as if they owned it." "But they never asked whose name was written where it counts?" Martha sat back, absorbing that. "Do you plan to use it?" "I don't plan to leave it unused." She smiled faintly. "Good." We spent the next hour talking quietly. Not about revenge or anger, but about something simpler. The relief of stepping away from noise. Martha made soup. I ate slowly, feeling warmth return to places inside me I hadn't visited in a long time. When night came, she made up the guest bed with the old quilt her mother had sewn. I lay down carefully, listening to the gentle hum of her refrigerator, the soft creak of the house as it settled. It was not my home, but it held me kindly. As I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of the day settle around me, not crushing, just real. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't going back. The next morning, I woke before Martha did. Old habits never leave you. Years of rising early to make breakfast for a husband who left for work at dawn. Then for a son who never appreciated the smell of warm oatmeal, but ate it anyway. My body still remembered those mornings, even if my life had outgrown them. Martha's house was quiet. I put on my shoes slowly, careful not to wake her, and stepped outside into the sharp, cool air. The sky had the pale blue of early spring, the kind that promises warmth but asks for patience. I walked down the street with my bag in my hand, not because I needed it today, but because I didn't trust the idea of leaving anything behind. Not anymore. The bank opened at 9. I arrived at 8:45. I sat on the stone bench near the entrance and watched the employees inside move through their morning routines. Young people mostly, polished and rushed, carrying coffees larger than their stomachs. I wondered if they looked at someone my age and thought she was here to ask about a lost PIN number or to withdraw $20 for groceries. When the doors unlocked, a young man held one open for me. "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning," I said, stepping inside. The lobby smelled of printer ink and disinfectant wipes. Everything too bright, too clean. I approached the counter where a woman with neat hair and a soft coral lipstick smiled politely. "How can we help you today?" "I need to speak with someone about property documents," I said, "and potential sale arrangements." Her expression sharpened, but not with suspicion, more with attention. "Of course. Do you have the documents with you?" I opened my bag and slid the manila envelope across the counter. She glanced at the corner of it and nodded. "Please take a seat. I'll call a senior consultant." I sat on a padded chair, the kind that tries to look comfortable, but never quite succeeds. A few minutes passed before a tall man in a gray suit approached. He was in his 50s maybe, with silver at his temples and an earnest face. "Mrs. Whitford?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Daniel. Let's talk in my office." His office had a large window overlooking the parking lot and a small plant wilting bravely in the corner. He gestured for me to sit and opened the envelope carefully, as if it held something fragile. He read through the deed slowly, page by page. His eyebrows rose a little. "This house is fully in your name," he said. "Sole ownership. No liens, no shared claim, no transfer history since your husband passed." "I know," I said, though hearing it aloud settled something inside me. Daniel continued flipping through. "Everything is clean. You're in an excellent position if you're considering selling." "I'm beyond considering," I said. "I want options, timelines, what steps I need to take." He looked up at me, perhaps expecting hesitation. Instead, he found a woman who'd run out of reasons to doubt herself. "May I ask why you're choosing to sell?" he said gently. I didn't explain Clara, or the clothes on the lawn, or the years of shrinking myself to fit into a corner of the life I once built. Those details weren't for him. They were for me, and I had already lived them. "It's time," I said simply. He nodded, accepting that as enough. "We can connect you with a real estate partner, and we'll secure the documents. I'll make certified copies and store the originals until closing." I breathed out slowly. Good. Daniel studied me for a moment. "You're remarkably composed, Mrs. Whitford." Many clients hesitate at this stage. "I've hesitated for years," I said. "This is the first thing I'm doing without hesitation." He smiled, the kind of smile that respects rather than patronizes. "Then we'll make this smooth for you." The printer began humming as he made duplicates. I watched the pages slide out, my life reduced to ink and legal language. Yet somehow those pages felt more like armor than paperwork. When he handed me the copies, I placed them neatly in my bag. "Is there anything else you'd like to secure or transfer?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "But soon." We shook hands, his grip firm but not overconfident. As I stepped out of the office and back into the bright lobby, a calm certainty settled over me. Outside, the day had warmed slightly. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, the envelope resting in my bag, its weight steady and honest. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't look like something that would simply happen to me. It looked like something I might shape with my own two hands. I walked back toward Martha's house with that quiet thought resting in my chest. It took 2 days for the real estate agent to call. His name was Stephen Holt, a man in his mid-30s whose voice carried that quick, polished confidence of someone accustomed to selling more excitement than property. He spoke rapidly, promising efficiency, discretion, and a streamlined process. I listened quietly, letting him finish every sentence before agreeing to meet at the house on Thursday morning. Martha insisted on driving me. "You're not arriving there alone," she said, her tone firm in the way only old friends can be without sounding intrusive. I didn't argue. The thought of walking up that driveway again brought a tightness to my chest. Not heartbreak exactly, but a kind of ache born from remembering too clearly what used to live there. We parked across the street. The house looked the same, of course. Red shutters, the maple tree Andrew planted at 12, the narrow walkway I had swept for decades. But it no longer felt like a place that belonged to me. Not because of Clara, but because something inside me had already stepped past it. Ownership is legal, but attachment is something quieter and more fragile. Stephen stood at the gate checking his watch. He smiled as soon as he saw me. "Mrs. Whitford, it's a pleasure. I've heard wonderful things about this property." "You've never been inside," I reminded him softly. "Well," he said with a laugh, "that's what today is for." He looked past me to Martha. "Would you like your friend to join us?" "She's not here for the tour. She's here for me." Martha crossed her arms with a small, satisfied smile, and Stephen nodded quickly, understanding the boundary. I unlocked the door. The key felt colder than I remembered. When I pushed it open, the familiar scent of the hallway, pine cleaner, and a faint hint of old books rose around me. I stood still for a moment, letting the memories settle. Stephen stepped inside with his tablet raised, scanning every corner the way a person appraises value rather than history. "The bones are excellent," he said, running his gaze along the molding. "Original woodwork still intact. Lovely natural light." I walked behind him slowly. He saw potential profit. I saw 42 years of my life arranged in quiet corners. The marks on the kitchen threshold where Andrew measured his height each birthday. The stain on the dining room rug from when my husband spilled cranberry sauce during a Thanksgiving he insisted on cooking himself, even though he'd never used an oven before. Clara had tried to hide that rug last year, claiming it looked tired. I had refused. Stephen pointed to the sliding doors. "These lead to the backyard, right?" "Yes." He stepped out first. I followed. The grass had grown longer than it should have. Clara always said she'd take over gardening, but never did. I bent down and touched the soil near the flower bed. Dry. I had watered those flowers every week, even when my knees screamed at me. Now they looked dull, as if waiting for someone to remember they were alive. "Buyers will like this space," Stephen said, "especially families. We can list at 1.2 if we handle the staging well, but honestly, with this market, it might go higher." 1.2 is enough, I said quietly. He blinked. Most clients wanted more. I wanted clean closure. Inside again, I moved room by room, touching little, observing much. My bedroom looked untouched, though I knew Clara had packed it up quickly after I left. She'd stacked my books on the floor. She had always disliked how many I kept, saying they made the house look older, as if age were a flaw. Stephen turned to me. Would you like to walk through alone? Many owners do before selling. I nodded. Yes. Thank you. He stepped outside with Martha, leaving me in the quiet of my own rooms. I walked slowly, steadying myself on the railing of the staircase as I climbed. The air felt still, as if the house were holding its breath. In the upstairs hallway, I paused. A faint dent on the wall caught my eye. Andrew had hit it with a toy truck when he was 3, then cried for hours thinking he had ruined the whole house. I had kissed the top of his head and told him nothing in the world was so fragile it couldn't bear the touch of someone who didn't mean harm. I suppose I believed that still, though life proved me wrong in small ways. When I returned downstairs, Stephen was ready. We can start showings tomorrow if you like. That soon? Speed is our advantage, and with a house in this condition, buyers will move fast. Martha stepped inside again. If she's ready, then yes. I looked at her, then at the house. I'm ready. Stephen smiled and tapped something into his tablet. Then by this time next week, you could be in closing negotiations. I nodded, feeling an unexpected wave of steadiness move through me. Everything was now in motion, and I didn't feel fear. We stepped outside. I locked the door one last time and placed the key gently into Stephen's hand. The metal no longer felt cold. It was just a key now, not a story. We walked back to Martha's car, and I didn't look over my shoulder. By Friday afternoon, the house had already been shown twice. Stephen called with the bright enthusiasm of a man who smelled a successful commission. 2 strong couples, Mrs. Whitford. One of them is ready to make an offer as soon as tonight. I thanked him, hung up the phone, and sat at Martha's kitchen table staring at the steam rising from my tea. Everything was moving quickly, almost too quickly, but I didn't feel overwhelmed. It was as if the world had finally aligned to match a decision I should have made years ago. But the quiet didn't last. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating against the wood like a small, trapped insect. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it started again. The name on the screen was Andrew. I didn't answer. Martha looked over from the sink. He's finally noticed you're gone? It seems he has, I said. The phone fell silent for a moment. Then came the vibration of a voicemail. Another. Then 3 in a row. I waited until they stopped before reaching for the device. Martha raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I put the phone to my ear. Mom, where are you? Clara said you stormed off without saying anything. This is getting ridiculous. I closed my eyes. Stormed off. That was the version he'd been given. The next message was shorter. Mom, answer the phone. We need to talk. Then Clara's voice, sharper, brittle, stretched thin. Helen, this isn't how grown adults behave. You can't just disappear. You left your things everywhere. It's childish. I let the words settle like dust. I had taken everything that mattered. Anything left behind meant little more than clutter. The last message came from Andrew again, the tone clipped, impatient. Look, I don't know what you expect us to do. You can't just run off because of one disagreement. Call me. One disagreement. I almost smiled. Children grow tall, get degrees, build careers, start families, but some remain blind to the quiet wounds they help create. The phone buzzed again. A text this time. Just one sentence. "When are you coming home?" I stared at those words longer than I meant to. Home. The place they believed belonged to them. The place where my presence was tolerated as long as I stayed small enough not to disturb the balance they curated. Martha dried her hands and sat down across from me. "What did he say?" "Doesn't matter," I replied. "He wants an explanation. He wants me back." "Do you want to go back?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the tea in my cup, the way the liquid trembled ever so slightly when I breathed. Then I shook my head. "I want peace," I said. "That house hasn't held peace for me in a long time." Martha touched my hand lightly. "You deserve more than being treated like something in the way." My phone buzzed again, another string of calls. I turned it face down. "Let him sit with the silence," Martha said. "He's not used to it." That's exactly why it's needed. Later, as evening settled, Stephen called again. "Mrs. Whitford? One of the couples has submitted an offer. Full asking price. 1.2 million. They're eager to close." I felt something shift inside me. Not excitement, not triumph, but relief. A clean line drawn under a long chapter. "I'll review it," I said. Martha poured me another cup of tea. "Well?" "It's happening," I said. "It's real." She smiled. "And how do you feel?" "Lighter," I said, as if the ground under my feet finally stopped tilting. We spent the rest of the evening in gentle conversation. I didn't check my phone again. It kept buzzing periodically, vibrating against the wood until the battery began to falter. I let it. After dinner, Martha went to bed early, leaving me alone at the kitchen table. The house was dim except for the lamp near the stove. Shadows softened the room, turning it warm and familiar. I opened my bag and took out the deed copies Daniel had made. I traced the edge of the paper with my thumb. I had lived with the weight of that house for so long that letting go felt strangely like reclaiming something. Andrew's last message came through as the screen dimmed. "Mom, please respond. This isn't like you." He was wrong. It was exactly like me. The difference was only that this time, I wasn't bending myself into silence. I placed the phone back into my bag and turned off the light, leaving the kitchen washed in shadows and the soft hum of the refrigerator. The night felt steady around me as I walked toward the guest room, my steps unhurried, my breath calm, the decision already made in my heart. Daniel called early that morning. I was sitting on Martha's porch with a blanket over my knees, watching two sparrows arguing over a crust of bread, when the phone vibrated against my palm. "Mrs. Whitford," he began, his voice calm but brisk. "The buyers have provided all required documentation. If you're ready, we can finalize the contract today." Today. The word landed gently, not with pressure, but with certainty. "Yes," I said. "I'll come in this afternoon." After breakfast, toast, marmalade, and Martha fussing as if feeding me would somehow anchor the day, I gathered my things. The deed copies, my ID, and a small notebook where I had written down questions in my shaky handwriting. Old age makes paper a safer memory than the mind. Martha drove me again. She didn't talk much, sensing the weight of what was ahead, or perhaps respecting the silence I needed to prepare myself. The bank's parking lot was half full. People hurried in and out, their lives rushing forward. Mine was settling into a new shape. Daniel met us in the lobby. "Right this way," he said, carrying a folder thick with printed documents. "We've prepared everything." The buyer's agent is on call if needed. His office felt smaller today, or perhaps I took up more space knowing what I was there to do. He sat across from me, placing the folder gently on the table. Before we begin, is there anything you'd like to review? I opened my notebook. The questions I'd written looked almost childish in their simplicity, but each mattered to me. Will this sale be final immediately? The agreement is binding as soon as you sign. Funds will be transferred within 3 business days. And there's no requirement for Andrew or his wife to approve anything. Daniel shook his head. None at all. You're the sole owner. No one else has legal standing. I nodded. That confirmation, clear, factual, without emotion, felt like someone smoothing a wrinkled sheet I'd been sleeping under for too long. We went through the paperwork page by page. Daniel explained each clause, each obligation, each finality. I initialed, signed, dated. My hand was steady. Every signature felt like placing a stone back where it belonged. Half an hour later, Daniel closed the folder. That's it, he said quietly. The house is officially sold. I sat back, letting the words settle inside me. They didn't echo. They didn't strike. They simply fit. You did this with remarkable clarity, Daniel added. Most people your age hesitate. I've been hesitating my whole life, I said. I'm done with that. He gave a small nod of respect. Not pity, not politeness. Respect. Martha walked into the office just as Daniel finished handing me the final packet. She looked at my face for a second, reading it like a long letter. It's done, she said softly. It is. We left the bank slowly. The sun had climbed high, warming the pavement. Martha reached for my arm, not because I needed help walking, but because she knew human touch steadies more than balance. Are you all right? She asked. Yes, I said. Strangely, yes. She drove us home the long way, taking the scenic road past the lake. We didn't speak much. The quiet was gentle, like the inside of a church before anyone arrives. Back at her house, I set the folder on the kitchen table. The documents looked almost ordinary lying there. Lines of text, signatures, a transaction completed. No paper could show what it had cost me to reach this point. I poured myself a small glass of water and sat down. My hands were calm, my breath slow. But something inside me, something tired and bruised, began to release. For years, that house had been both shelter and battlefield. I had slept under its roof believing endurance was the bravest thing an old woman could offer. Now I knew better. Sometimes the bravest thing is walking away. My phone buzzed again, face down on the table. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to hear the messages that would be waiting. Apologies caught between obligation and pride. Questions shaped like demands. Confusion disguised as concern. I kept my eyes on the glass in my hand, the rim reflecting the afternoon light. A small, ordinary moment. Yet I felt more in control of myself than I had in years. The house was gone. Sold. Final. I had not fought for it. I had chosen something far harder. I had fought for myself. And that, I realized, was the first decision in a very long time that belonged solely to me. I spent most of the next morning folding my clothes into neat stacks on Martha's guest bed. It was a small room with floral wallpaper and a single window that looked out onto her lemon tree. The sunlight pooled gently on the quilt, turning everything gold. Outside, I could hear Martha humming as she watered her herb garden, the soft spray of the hose mixing with birdsong. There was something soothing in packing slowly, deliberately, as though each folded garment was a small apology to myself for all the years I'd hurried through things that mattered. I didn't have much, just a few dresses, 2 sweaters, the good shoes I wore to church, and the cardigan Clara had tossed onto the lawn. I shook it out again, noticing a faint stain on the sleeve. Grass, maybe, or her resentment touching fabric like it touched everything else. Martha came in with 2 mugs of tea. She handed me one and sat on the chair by the window. "You're awfully quiet today." "I'm thinking," I said. "About what comes next?" "Yes." She watched me over the rim of her mug. "Are you sure you're ready to move on from all of it? From the house? From them?" Her question wasn't accusatory, just honest. "I think I've been ready for years," I said. "I was just waiting for permission from people who never planned to give it." Martha nodded. "Sometimes the only permission you need is the one you give yourself." I placed another folded sweater on the bed. I keep trying to remember when things started to shift. I look back, searching for a moment when Andrew stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as someone who needed to be managed. "That didn't happen overnight," Martha said. "Clara didn't help." "Clara accelerated what was already there," I agreed. "But I should have seen it sooner." I let out a breath. Somewhere along the line, I accepted being spoken to like an inconvenience. You were trying to keep peace. Peace shouldn't cost a person their dignity. Martha reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm, her grip gentle. "You're doing the right thing, Helen. There's something I didn't tell you yesterday." I walked to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Inside was a small wooden box I'd brought from the house, one of the few items I cared to keep. I lifted the lid and took out a thin envelope. When Daniel gave me the paperwork, he also handed me the summary of funds. The amount. It's real, Martha. It's enough for me to choose a new life instead of feeling pushed into one. "You earned every cent of it," she said. I slipped the envelope back into the box and closed it. "I've been thinking. Once the funds clear, I want to find a small place. Nothing fancy. Something I can manage on my own." "A fresh start," Martha said. "Exactly." We were quiet for a moment. Then she stood up and walked to the closet. "You don't need all this," she said, waving at the clothes I'd carefully arranged. "Take what feels like you. Leave the rest. Starting over means traveling light." I laughed softly. "You sound like my husband." "He was a good man," Martha said. "He'd be proud you finally stood up for yourself." I swallowed. He'd also ask me why I let it go on this long. "No," she said. "He'd understand why you tried. Love makes us patient. Patience makes us blind." I sat on the edge of the bed and let my shoulders sink. Fatigue slipped over me, not heavy, not unwelcome, just honest. "I don't know what Andrew expects," I said. "Maybe for me to pretend none of this matters. Maybe to come home quietly." "He expects the woman you were," Martha said, "not the woman you are now." The room felt still for a moment, not tense, just full, like the air had shifted into something clearer. A notification buzzed on my phone. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I zipped the small gray suitcase sitting at my feet. The sound of the zipper sliding shut felt final in a way signing documents never could. "I'm not going back," I said. "I know," Martha replied. "And good for you." She stood and smoothed the blanket with one hand. "Take your time, Helen. Pack slowly. Decide slowly. You've earned the right to move through the world at your own pace." I looked around the room, small, warm, quiet. A soft landing place, not a prison. a place where no one raised their voice or measured my worth. I think I'll rest a bit, I said. Do that. Martha smiled. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything. When she left the room, I lay back on the bed, the mattress dipping gently beneath me. The afternoon light had shifted, softening into the kind of glow that makes everything look a little more forgiving. I closed my eyes and let myself breathe, steady and slow, knowing the hardest part was behind me and the next step would come when I was ready to take it. They found out on a Sunday evening. I wasn't there, of course. I was sitting on Martha's porch with a bowl of sliced peaches when the first voicemail from Andrew arrived, the tone far more alarmed than anything he had left before. I didn't listen to it right away. I let the phone rest on the table while I watched the light fade across the neighbor's roof. What do you suppose they're doing right now? Martha asked gently. Trying the front door, I said. She smiled faintly. And learning it's no longer theirs. That image didn't give me satisfaction, just a quiet clarity, the way truth sometimes settles in a room without noise. The next morning, while Martha was making oatmeal, I finally listened to the messages. Andrew's first words were strained, confused. Mom, call me. Something's wrong with the house. There are people here. Just call me, please. I set the phone down. The oatmeal simmered. The air smelled of cinnamon. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Then a text. Mom, the locks are changed. What's going on? I didn't answer. It was early, and I wanted the day to unfold without rushing. Around 10, I heard a car outside. Martha looked through the curtains. Not them, she murmured. A truck. We went back to our tea. But across town, at my old house, the story was unfolding exactly as Stephen predicted. Quietly, professionally, without drama from anyone except the two people least prepared to face consequences. The new owners, a couple named Frank and Elise, had moved in early that morning. They'd brought only a few boxes and a bag of groceries, wanting to clean and plan before the rest of their belongings arrived. Stephen told me later they were cheerful, polite people, both school teachers, amazed to have found such a lovely home within their budget. They had no idea of the family storm attached to it. When Andrew and Clara arrived, they walked up the driveway side by side. She carried herself with the same rigid confidence I knew well, the kind used to compensate for fear of appearing small. Andrew's shoulders were tight, his steps too quick. They didn't notice the unfamiliar car in the driveway, or perhaps they assumed it belonged to a contractor. They went straight to the front door, and the key didn't work. Frank opened the door before they could knock again. Polite smile, relaxed posture. He had no reason to anticipate hostility. Can I help you? Andrew stared at him. Yes, we live here. Who are you? Frank blinked. We're the new owners. We closed yesterday. Clara let out a short, incredulous laugh. That's impossible. This is my mother-in-law's house. No one sold anything. She did, Frank said calmly. We purchased it from a Ms. Helen Whitford. For a moment, neither Andrew nor Clara spoke. The words hung in the air like dust in sunlight. No, Clara said, stepping forward. There's been a mistake. She doesn't make decisions like that. She wouldn't know how. I could almost hear Frank's steady, patient voice as he replied, I'm afraid there's no mistake. Everything is official. You should contact her. Andrew's voice cracked somewhere deep in the middle. Where is she? We don't know, Frank said. But her agent should. Clara pushed past him, trying to look inside the entryway. Elise stepped forward. She may have been soft-spoken, but firmness rose in her like a quiet tide. "Ma'am, you can't enter. This is our home." Clara recoiled as if slapped. For someone used to being in control, boundaries felt like insults. I imagined Andrew then, face pale, hands shaking, fear curdling into anger. My gentle, distracted boy, now a grown man struggling to understand how something he assumed was his, had slipped out of reach. The phone on my table buzzed again. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I took my bowl to the sink and rinsed it. Around noon, Martha and I went for a walk. The air was cool, the sun mild. I felt unburdened, the way a person feels after putting down a heavy bag they carried too far. When we returned, there were 8 missed calls. 5 from Andrew, 3 from Clara. A new voicemail played automatically. "Mom," Andrew said, voice low, ragged. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell us you were selling the house? We showed up today and there are strangers living here. Please, call me." I sat on the edge of the sofa and listened to the rest. Clara's message was brittle and sharp. "Helen, this is absurd. You can't just disappear and sabotage everyone's life. We need to discuss this. Call us back immediately." I turned off the phone. Martha was in the kitchen, slicing apples for a pie. She didn't ask what the messages said. She knew. "What will you do?" she asked instead. I sat back, letting the quiet fill the room. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing left to do." "Do you feel guilty?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "I feel done." And as I looked at the dim screen of my phone, the house behind me already belonging to someone else, I felt the truth of it settle inside me. Calm, grounded, final. I was finished carrying what was never mine to hold. The phone stayed silent for most of the afternoon, not because the calls stopped, but because I finally powered it off. Martha approved without saying a word. She simply handed me a small bowl of cherries, set her knitting aside, and sat down across from me. We didn't talk about Andrew or Clara. We didn't talk about the house. We let the quiet breathe. It wasn't until later that evening, when the sky turned the color of faded cotton, that I allowed myself to think about everything that had led me here. Not the dramatic moments, the raised voices, the slammed doors, the indignities served in measured spoons, but the long, thin years where I had convinced myself that enduring was the same as loving. People imagine families collapse suddenly, but that's rarely true. They loosen one thread at a time. I remembered the first moment I felt myself becoming small in my own home. Andrew had asked me to stay upstairs while he and Clara entertained friends, claiming I wouldn't enjoy the conversation. He said it lightly, like a suggestion, but I saw the flicker of embarrassment in his eyes. That was years ago. I ignored it. I told myself he was trying to impress people, that he didn't mean anything cruel by it. Then came the day Clara rearranged my kitchen without asking. "Modern people don't use things like this," she said, holding up the cast-iron pan my husband had cooked Sunday breakfast in for decades. She didn't throw it out, but she moved it to the garage. That was the same day she called my gardening sentimental clutter. A dozen moments like that. 100. None big enough to name, but each one took something from me. "Where did it start?" I whispered to no one. Martha looked up from her knitting. "Where did what start?" "The shrinking," I said. "The part of me that kept giving ground." She set her needles down. "Helen, you're blaming yourself because you're a mother. That's what mothers do. We look for where we failed, where we allowed things. But people reveal who they are. You didn't create their choices." I wanted to believe her, but the truth was harder to hold. He used to be different, I said. Andrew was a sweet boy, thoughtful, soft-hearted, and somehow he let himself become this. People change, Martha said. Life hardens some and weakens others. And sometimes, she added more quietly, people marry someone who shapes them into a version of themselves you don't recognize. I looked down at my hands. I should have spoken up sooner. Maybe. And maybe if you did, they would have punished you sooner. Either way, you're speaking up now. A breeze drifted through the window, carrying the smell of cut grass. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Simple sounds. Steady sounds. I hadn't realized how much noise Clara created in a home. Her constant commentary, her nitpicking, the way she filled every room with judgment. I had lived under that cloud longer than I should have. That was true. But guilt wasn't the whole story. There was something else. Something older. Fear. Not of losing the house, not of being alone, but of losing my role. The role of mother, of helper, of dependable background presence. It is difficult to admit that you stayed somewhere not out of love, but out of the belief that leaving meant you had failed at the thing you were supposed to be good at. As the evening deepened, I walked to the back porch and sat on the old wicker chair Martha kept forgetting to replace. The crickets were starting their nightly chorus, and the air was warm enough to sit without a shawl. I folded my hands in my lap. I thought of the house, my house, that was no longer mine. Oddly, I didn't miss it. I missed the version of myself who once lived there, the woman who baked bread on Sundays, who painted the living room walls a pale lemon because she wanted the house to feel bright even on gray days. The woman who believed she was building something permanent in the shape of a family. But permanence, I realized, is an illusion people cling to because the alternative feels too unsteady. Martha joined me with 2 glasses of cold water. She sat in the chair beside me and didn't ask what I was thinking. That was the kind of kindness age teaches, knowing when silence comforts more than words. After a long time, she said, "You know, it's all right to grieve something even when you chose to let it go." I took a small sip of water. "I'm not grieving the house," I said. "I'm grieving the years I spent believing I had more time with my son than I did." Martha nodded. "That's a different kind of loss." "Yes." The streetlights flickered on one by one, turning the road into a soft ribbon of yellow light. The world outside felt calm, almost fragile in its gentleness. I leaned back in the chair, listening to the crickets, letting the night settle around me. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something quieter, something half-formed, an unwinding, a loosening, a space opening inside me where sorrow and relief could sit side by side without argument. And for the first time in many years, I allowed myself the simple truth that sometimes letting go is the only way to keep what remains of yourself. Lily called the next morning. Not a text, not a voicemail, an actual call. Her name lit up the screen like a small kindness I hadn't realized I was waiting for. I answered before the second ring. "Grandma?" Her voice was soft, careful. "Dad's been, well, he's been frantic, but I wanted to talk to you first." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that settle. "I'm all right, sweetheart." "I figured," she said. "You always sound calm when everyone else is running around like their hair's on fire." I smiled. She had her mother's humor. Andrew's first wife, the one he'd lost too soon, long before Clara arrived with her sharp opinions and sharper expectations. Lily had inherited gentleness from that side of the family, a softness that didn't weaken her, but steadied her. "Can I come see you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Of course." Martha insisted on making scones before Lily arrived, as if a visit from my granddaughter required a ceremony. By the time Lily knocked, the kitchen smelled of butter and warm berries. She stepped inside with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her dark hair pulled into a loose braid. She hugged me longer than she ever had before. "I'm so sorry about everything," she whispered. "You don't have anything to apologize for." She pulled back and studied my face. "Dad won't tell me what happened. Clara is, well, Clara. She said something about you acting irrational and making impulsive decisions." Lily rolled her eyes. "Which usually means the opposite." I motioned for her to sit at the table. "I'm not acting impulsively. I made a decision I should have made a long time ago." "Did you really sell the house?" she asked. "I did." Lily let out a slow breath, not shocked, not judging, just absorbing it. "Was it because of Clara?" "It was because I needed to choose myself," I said, "and because staying there had become smaller than leaving." She nodded. "I get it." I looked at her, really looked at her. 19, bright, gentle, and far wiser than her father in some ways. "Are you angry with me?" I asked. "No," she said. "I'm angry for you." Something inside me softened. After all the noise, all the accusations, all the years of being told what I was or wasn't, this quiet alignment felt like balm. Martha brought over the plate of scones, set them between us, and then slipped into the living room to give us space. Lily picked one up, tore it open, let the steam drift upward. "Grandma," she said slowly, "I know Dad is going to try to talk you into coming back, or undoing whatever you've done. He can't undo it," I said, "and I'm not coming back." She nodded again, her eyes warm with understanding. Do you have a plan now?" "I'm going to find a place of my own," I said. "Something simple, quiet, something I can care for without feeling like I'm in someone else's way." "I'd like to see it when you find it," she said. "You will." We talked for an hour about her classes, her part-time job at the bookstore, the stray cat she'd been feeding behind her dorm. Ordinary things. Good things. The kind that remind you life keeps moving even when parts of you feel stuck. When the conversation quieted, Lily reached into her backpack and pulled out a small envelope. "I wrote this a while ago," she said, pushing it toward me. "Just something I wanted you to have." Inside was a photograph of the two of us at a fall festival years ago. Lily on my shoulders, her little hands gripping my forehead, both of us laughing. I remembered that day clearly. Andrew had been working. Clara had stayed home, claiming allergies. It had been just us. "You've always been there for me," she said. "And I want to be here for you now." I placed my hand over hers. "You already are." She stayed a little longer, helping Martha with dishes, walking around the garden, telling me about a poetry class she didn't think she'd enjoy, but ended up loving. When she finally stood to leave, she hugged me again, tighter than before. "Call me when you're ready to look at places," she said. "I will." After she left, the house felt warm, not with noise, but with something steadier, something like hope. I sat at the table and held the photograph for a while, letting the memory rest gently in my hands. For the first time in a long time, I felt I wasn't losing family. I was choosing who to keep close. I began looking at apartments the following week. Martha insisted on coming with me, not because she doubted my judgment, but because she believed no woman should tour unfamiliar places alone at 79. I didn't argue. The truth is, companionship softens the starkness of starting over. The first place was a cramped one-bedroom above a laundromat. The floors slanted, and the windows rattled even without wind. The landlord was a thin man who kept scratching his neck as if he expected a better tenant to walk in behind me. I thanked him politely and stepped back outside. "That's a no," Martha said before I could speak. The second place was better. Clean, freshly painted, with a small balcony overlooking a row of mailboxes. But something about it felt impersonal, the kind of place people pass through rather than live in. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and loneliness. I knew immediately it wasn't for me. "We'll keep looking," I told the realtor. The third property was on the edge of town near the coast, a short building with stucco walls and a walkway lined with succulents. The air smelled faintly of salt. Even before we reached the door, I felt a quiet tug in my chest, as if something in me recognized the place. The realtor, a middle-aged woman with patient eyes, unlocked the door and stepped aside. "It's small," she said, "but it's peaceful. Most of the residents are retirees." I walked in slowly. The living room wasn't large, but sunlight spilled in through a wide window, warming the hardwood floor. A soft breeze drifted through the open kitchen window, carrying the steady hum of the ocean. Martha wandered toward the bedroom. "It's cozy," she called. I stood in the middle of the room and imagined mornings here. Tea, open curtains, quiet. No footsteps rushing around me. No clipped voices. No feeling of being in someone else's way. The bedroom had a small built-in shelf beside the window. A perfect place for books. My heart tightened a little. Clara had once told me I should get rid of the clutter when I brought home a box of old novels from a yard sale. I had kept them anyway, though she'd hidden most of them in the attic. "Do you like it?" Martha asked when she saw my face. "I do," I said. "Very much." The realtor smiled. "It's available immediately." We walked out onto the tiny balcony. Below us, a woman in her 70s was watering potted herbs. She looked up, waved, and went back to tending her plants. Something about that small, ordinary gesture felt like permission. "How far is the beach?" I asked. 5 minutes on foot," the realtor said. I nodded. "Show me the paperwork." We sat at the small kitchen counter while she unfolded the forms. Lease agreements, deposit amounts, rules about noise and parking. I read every line carefully. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wanted the decision to be fully mine. When I reached the signature line, I paused. Not in doubt, just allowing myself one last moment of stillness before crossing from the life I had endured into the life I was choosing. Then I signed. The realtor gathered the documents with a satisfied nod. "Welcome home, Mrs. Whitford." Martha squeezed my arm gently. "You did it." We left the building and walked toward the shore. I didn't need to see the apartment twice. My body already knew it belonged to me, the way some places settle into your bones before your mind catches up. The day was cool, the sky pale and open. The waves rolled steadily, each one rising and falling with a quiet certainty. I walked to the edge of the sand and let the wind lift strands of my hair. "It feels right," I said. "It feels like freedom," Martha replied. I watched the water for a long time, letting the rhythm settle inside me. There was no rush now, no pressure to react, to explain, to justify. I had stepped out of a life that had grown too small and into something spacious enough to breathe in. When we finally turned back toward the car, the sun was lowering, painting the rooftops in soft orange. I held the keys to the new apartment in my hand, small and warm from my grip. They didn't feel heavy. They felt like possibility. And that was enough. Andrew came to see me 2 days after I signed the lease. I knew he would eventually. Silence has a way of unsettling people who are used to being answered. Martha was out running errands, so it was just me in the kitchen when I heard a car pull up. The engine shut off, and then came the hesitant footsteps. Slow, deliberate. The rhythm of a man rehearsing words he wasn't sure he believed. When I opened the door, he stood there with his hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders hunched the way they used to be when he came home late from high school and didn't want to explain where he'd been. "Mom," he said quietly. "Andrew." He stepped inside, but didn't sit. His eyes moved around the kitchen, taking in Martha's ceramic bowls, the framed cross-stitch on the wall, the familiarity of a home that wasn't his. "I tried calling," he said. "A lot." "I know. Why didn't you answer?" I pulled out a chair and sat. "Because I wasn't ready." He hesitated, then finally lowered himself into the seat across from me. For a moment, he just looked at his hands, turning his wedding ring in slow circles. "You sold the house," he said. Not angry, not accusing, just bewildered. "I did. Without telling me." "There was nothing to tell you," I said. "It belonged to me." He winced at that, not from disagreement, but from all the years he had chosen to forget that fact. "Clara is furious," he said. "I expected as much." "She says you blindsided us." I met his eyes. "Andrew, your wife threw my clothes onto the lawn and told me I was worthless. You didn't blindside me that day. She did. You did. By letting it happen." He swallowed hard. The truth landed somewhere deep, where excuses couldn't reach. "I wasn't there," he said softly. "You haven't been there for a long time." He looked up, pain flickering across his face. "Mom, I didn't know it had gone that far." "You didn't want to know." He didn't argue. That surprised me. Instead, he leaned back, exhaling slowly, like a man carrying something he finally realized wasn't new, but had simply grown too heavy to ignore. "I should have protected you," he said. "I didn't need protection," I replied. "I needed respect, and I was getting less and less of it." He nodded, staring at the table. "Clara said you exaggerated." "I didn't." "I know," he said quietly. "I think I've known for a while." The room felt still then, filled with the quiet grief of a mother and son who had lived too many years talking around the truth instead of through it. "I'm sorry," he said. I believed him. But apologies don't change roads already taken. "I'm not angry anymore," I told him. "I'm just done carrying what doesn't belong to me." He nodded again, slower this time. "Do you need anything?" "No," I said. "I have a place now. A good one. I'll be moving in soon." He tried to smile, but it faltered. "Can I see it sometime?" "If you come kindly," I said. "Not out of guilt, not out of obligation. Just as my son." His eyes softened, and for the first time in many years, he looked like the boy who used to fall asleep with his head on my shoulder. "I can do that," he said. I stood and he followed, unsure whether he should hug me or not. When he finally stepped forward, the embrace was brief, uncertain, fragile. When he left, he paused at the door. "Mom, I hope you're happy." "I'm getting there," I said. He nodded once more and walked to his car. I watched him drive away, the dust settling slowly behind him. and felt the strange, quiet relief of a chapter shifting into something gentler without needing to be repaired. Sometimes peace isn't reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply stepping into a life that finally fits. Clara didn't wait long. She never did when anger was involved. 2 hours after Andrew left Martha's house, my phone buzzed with the first message. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, letting the steam rise against my cheek while the sun slid toward late afternoon. When I finally tapped the screen, the words leapt out at me in sharp, frantic strokes. I can't believe what you've done. A second message arrived before I finished reading the first. You humiliated us. You made us look irresponsible. Do you have any idea how this affects our life? The emphasis wasn't accidental. Clara had always spoken as though my existence were an inconvenient footnote to the grand narrative she believed she was writing. I scrolled. Andrew is devastated. You should have talked to us. You acted like a child. Another message, longer this time. We opened our home to you. We let you stay with us. And this is how you repay us? By selling the house behind our backs and making us look like fools in front of neighbors, friends, everyone? I breathed in slowly, then out. Not from hurt. From the long familiarity of a tone I used to internalize without question. The tone that said, you owe us, no matter how we treat you. Martha stepped outside and glanced at the phone in my hand. Is it her? It is. She took a seat beside me. Are you all right? Yes, I said, and I was. Truly, another vibration. You have no idea what you've done to Andrew. He trusted you. That line gave me pause. Not because I believed it, but because of the way she used his name as a shield. As if she could wrap her cruelty in the language of concern and make it sound noble. I typed nothing. I deleted nothing. I simply let the messages collect in a row of small, glowing rectangles. Clara wasn't finished. We could have helped you make better decisions. You're not thinking clearly at your age. It's not safe. You need us. I let the phone rest face up on my knee. The arrogance in that one sentence, so casual, so confidently unkind, might have pierced me once. Not now, not anymore. Martha made a small sound, something between a sigh and a hum. People don't show their true colors when life is kind to them, she said. They show them when they're denied something. I nodded. Clara had been denied control. Nothing provoked her more. The next message was shorter. You embarrassed me. There it was, the real core of it all. Not the house, not Andrew, not even the imagined betrayal. Her pride was the wound she cared about. I had bruised an ego that thought itself untouchable. Then came another. You owe us an explanation. I set the phone aside. I don't owe anyone anything, I said. No, Martha replied. You don't. For a while we sat there in the soft evening light, watching the neighbors' sprinklers turn in gentle arcs across the lawn. My hands lay still on my lap, not trembling, not tense. There was a steadiness in me I hadn't felt in years. When I picked up the phone again, I read one more message. We need to meet. This isn't over. I almost smiled. That was the mistake Clara had made over and over, believing that conflict required participation from both sides. Believing that if she pushed hard enough, demanded loudly enough, insisted confidently enough, I would return to the place she kept for me, small, quiet, compliant. But this time, there was no place waiting for me in that house. No room she could push me back into. The home was gone. The decision was made. The path forward was already unfolding beneath my feet. I locked the screen. I'm not answering, I said. Good, Martha replied. Let her shout into the dark. It's not your job to light it for her. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint smell of someone grilling down the street. A simple, ordinary scent. It made me think of summers long ago, of evenings where life felt uncomplicated, where kindness didn't have to be earned through endurance. I thought I'd feel more, I said quietly. Hurt? Martha asked. Anger, I said. Or guilt. Something. And what do you feel instead? I looked out across the yard at the lemon tree with its new blossoms, at the sky softening into dusk. A kind of distance, I said. Not coldness, just distance. That's what letting go feels like. I nodded, settling back into my chair. Clara could fill my phone with messages, with demands, with all the noise she needed to feel powerful. But for the first time in a very long time, her words had nowhere left to land. And that quiet, steady, undisturbed, felt like a boundary finally holding. The bank transferred the funds 3 days after closing. Daniel called to confirm, his voice steady, professional, almost warm. Everything is complete, Mrs. Whitford. You should see the balance in your account. I thanked him, hung up, and sat for a moment in the stillness of Martha's living room. The number on the screen didn't overwhelm me. It didn't exhilarate me. It simply sat there, calm and exact, like a door quietly unlocked. I'm ready, I said aloud, though no one was in the room with me. When Martha came home from the grocery store, I told her I wanted to visit an attorney. She didn't ask why. She only nodded, set down her bags, and said, "Let me grab my keys." The attorney's office was small, tucked between a dentist and a sewing shop. A framed painting of a lighthouse hung over the reception desk. I liked that. Lighthouses have one job: stand still, shine steady, expect nothing in return. Mr. Lawson, the attorney, looked to be in his early 60s, with gray eyebrows and the kind of hands that folded slowly, thoughtfully. How can I help you today, Mrs. Whitford? I sat across from him and placed my folder on the desk. I want to protect what I have, I said. And I want to decide where it goes when I'm gone. He nodded, understanding without needing every detail. We can set up a living trust. That will keep your assets safe and avoid probate. Who would you like as the beneficiary? My granddaughter, I said. Lily Hart. Not your son? No, I said gently. Not my son. There was no anger in my voice, only truth worn smooth by time. Mr. Lawson began explaining the options: revocable versus irrevocable trusts, distribution choices, healthcare directives. I listened carefully, asking questions, making notes in the small notebook I kept in my bag. When he handed me the draft documents, I read every line. I made sure Lily's name was spelled correctly. I made sure no one could change the terms without my consent. I made sure the choices belonged to me, not to whoever felt entitled to the life I had built. Martha sat beside me in silence, arms folded, watching with the quiet pride of someone witnessing another person reclaim themselves. Once everything was in order, Mr. Lawson turned a final page toward me. If you're satisfied, he said, sign here. I did. My signature looked steadier than I expected. He notarized the documents, placed them in a neat folder, and slid it gently toward me. You've made clear, thoughtful decisions, he said. This is good work. I thanked him as we left the office. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm on my face. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, feeling the weight of the documents in my hands. Do you feel lighter? Martha asked. Not lighter, I said. more anchored. We drove home with the windows cracked open. The air carried the scent of early jasmine, soft and sweet. I watched it all drift past, the shops, the crosswalks, the sleepy streets, and felt a quiet certainty grow in me. I wasn't punishing anyone. I wasn't settling scores. I was simply placing my life into hands that had earned trust rather than demanded it. Back at the house, I set the folder on the table and made myself tea. Earl Grey, the one Lily likes. I held the cup in both hands, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. This time there was no trembling. Everything that needed protection was protected. Everything that needed closure was closed. And for the first time in many years, my future felt like something I could step into freely, without fear, without apology, without asking permission. The day I moved into the new apartment was warm and windless, the kind of morning that makes even the simplest actions feel deliberate. Martha helped me carry the last of my things inside: a suitcase, a box of books, the wooden keepsake box with the photograph Lily gave me. That was all. A life, trimmed to what mattered. The air inside smelled faintly of fresh paint and sea salt drifting through the open window. I stood in the middle of the living room, my hand still on the strap of my bag, letting the light settle around me. Yet nothing in the room bore the weight of old arguments or unspoken fears. Nothing carried anyone else's expectations. "This feels right," Martha said. "It does," I replied. We unpacked quietly. My dresses filled half the closet. My books fit perfectly on the built-in shelf. The small kitchen held only what I needed: 2 mugs, a teapot, a pan, a jar of sugar. Simple things. Honest things. I placed a single photograph on the bedside table, the one of Lily and me at the fall festival. It felt like a promise, not a memory. When Martha left, the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt mine. I made tea and carried it out onto the balcony. From there, I could see the ocean, not in its grand sweep, but in the steady rise and fall of the waves. Predictable, patient, unbothered by the world's noise. I wrapped my sweater tighter around my shoulders and let the wind brush my hair aside. I thought about Andrew, not with sorrow, but with a softened kind of distance. He would find his footing in time. Or he wouldn't. Some paths must be walked without a mother guiding them. I hoped he would learn something from all this. Not about punishment, but about care. About the quiet damage indifference can do. As for Clara, I no longer felt anything at all. That was its own kind of peace. My phone buzzed once. A message from Lily. "How's the new place? Send me a picture when you're settled." I smiled. Not every branch of a family tree grows straight, but some leaves still turn toward you. The sun dipped lower, painting the water gold. I sipped my tea slowly, savoring the warmth, the quiet, the unfamiliar feeling of a life that finally belonged to me. You can lose a house. You can lose a version of someone you once loved. But you must never lose yourself. I set the cup down and let the breeze fill the silence beside me. If my story finds its way to someone who needs it, then let it. And if you're reading this now, share it, comment on it, pass it on. Someone out there might be waiting for the courage to reclaim their own life too.